Om Shanti, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to another Yoga Small Talk, and we continue with 7 minutes Bhagavad Gita a day. We have reached verse 4, reading from chapter 6, the Yoga of Meditation. Verse 4. When a man is not attached to the sense objects or to actions, having renounced all thoughts, then he is said to have attained to yoga. So there is a beautiful commentary here, and we will of course read it, but before that, one very, very clear thing that comes from this verse is that externally we don't know. This is another point that repeats itself again and again, because it is said here, when is a person really established, attained to yoga? And remember here, yoga is the yoga of meditation. But how do we know that a person has reached this point that he is beyond desires? It will not be external. He said, renounced all thoughts. So often the beautiful example is brought of Swami Sivananda and Ramana Maharshi. Swami Sivananda was always doing. He was running this huge operation called the Sivananda Ashram, which turned into the Sivananda Nagar, this great city of Sivananda. So many things, hospitals, printing house, post office, disciples, tours, so many things. And still he's a non-doer. And then we have Ramana Maharshi sitting in the cave and meditating. Non-doer. In the same way. How does that work? Because in the real sense of yoga, the external things are not the indication. The sage will walk the path that is best for the entire humanity. He will follow his designation. And we cannot even talk about how they know what their designation is, because this is something that transcends the mind, transcends desires. We have in the Bhagavad Gita an indication that a great man should do things that set examples for others. But meditation is also a great service to humanity. This has to do with the vibratory level of the planet. It is a great service, filling the air with higher, the atmosphere rather, with higher vibration. And we will not go into what a sage can do during the meditation. There is some literature about that. You can also read the 3rd chapter and the Vibhuti Pada of the Raja Yoga Sutras and see that although a person is sitting still and is inside, can do many things. Swami Sivananda chose to act. Chose is not the mind, he transcended the mind, but he was very active externally. When you read his biographies, you see that internally he had a very, very different attitude. For instance, for many, many years, actually very close to the time that he left his body, the ashram was always in debt. Always. And Swami Sivananda was not following any logical financial planning scheme. And some of the disciples were concerned, and they were asking him how he sets his priorities, what is happening. And Swami Sivananda just told them, we have to continue teaching. And he was teaching through his publications to a great degree. So we have to continue that. The publications will never suffer. And the money comes from God when God wants. That's it. We are not really making or spending the money. It's all God's will. And he repeated to them again and again and again and again. This is not to say that Swami Sivananda was an irresponsible or illogical person. He was just established in a completely different truth. One that, until we are there, we cannot fully relate to. This is why it is said that we need to have a lot of faith in the teacher, because we don't really understand the reality that they live in. It takes a lot of faith. But then other sages were meditating and also supporting humanity in their own way. So the external appearance is not an indication, although close disciples of Swami Sivananda, for instance, the ones who wrote the biographies, also write very, very clearly that although this person was very, very, very active, it was very evident that his action was very, very different than their action. So that's another point to keep in mind. And about this verse, Swami Sivananda tells us that a person who is established in yoga, again here yoga is Raja Yoga, when a yogi, by keeping the mind quite steady, by withdrawing it from the objects of the senses, has attachment neither to sensual objects such as sound, nor for actions, knowing that they are of no use to him, meaning it's illusory. When he has renounced all thoughts which generate various sorts of desires for objects of this world and of the next, meaning have a good life here and heaven hereafter, then he is said to have become a Yoga Rudha, to be established in yoga. So we know that thoughts are the propelling power of actions. So when we renounce thoughts, specifically when we renounce desire, there will be no action. So this is the summary of this verse, reminding us again that yoga is something that happens internally. And again, when we read the words action and inaction, we need to go back to chapter 4 and understand that it's actually about the mental attitude and the sense of doership. And now, next, we will start a very, very beautiful teaching, starting from verse 5, about how to strengthen ourselves. So, please join us for the next teaching. Om Shanti.